Introduction to Camera Exposure. In this 6-part video, we will begin by examining 9 physical wall locations using the wall test. Then we will examine 9 physical wall locations using the exposure test. Third, we will check the wall for unwanted IR using the exposure test. Fourth, we will introduce unwanted infrared and watch the shape and color of the indicated IR locations change as the camera exposure value changes. Fifth, we will demonstrate the difference between camera exposure and gain. And finally, sixth, we will test an individual gun laser. Wall test. The purpose of the wall test is to show you 9 points on the wall which will show you exactly where your shooting wall is. It will show you the top of the wall, the left side of the wall, the right side of the wall, the bottom, and also the center. It does this by looking at various things that you have already input into the system. In order to determine where the top of your shooting area is, it looks at ceiling height. In order to decide where the left-hand edge of your shooting wall is, it looks at wall left of simulator. In order to determine where the right-hand side of your shooting area is, it looks at wall right of simulator. And now let's look at a sketch I've put together which will show you how the simulator starts in the lower left-hand corner, works its way up the left side, across the top, down the right side, across the bottom to the middle, and then finally finishes in the middle. Now let's actually do a wall test. So what I'm going to do is click on Wall Test, and when I do, I'm going to call out the numbers 1 through 9 as it rapidly moves around the wall. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the wall test is done. So I'm showing you all of this so that when we get into camera exposure, you'll understand where the camera is looking for infrared on the wall. Camera exposure. As we begin into the camera exposure area, I have highlighted on the screen the controls that are available on the main system configuration dialog box. And in general, you won't have any problems in this area. It will have been preset so that both heads are approximately at 48. In the event that you're having problems with one of two conditions, either you're having situations where you are shooting at a target and dry fire is not responding by not shooting, or you are calling for a target and dry fire is shooting and you haven't even necessarily picked up your gun yet. It just shoots on its own. If you have either of those two conditions, then you're going to want to come down to camera exposure, click, and in the dialog box that opens, I'm going to go through some procedures so that you can investigate the condition of your wall and, if necessary, make corrections to that wall. So what we're going to do to start out with is we're going to come to the bottom in the exposure area, and we're going to click and drag this exposure value to maximum. Then we're going to move up to gain. We're going to click and drag this slider all the way to high. Notice this area up here. It should begin to look a little bit familiar. This is position 1 on the wall, lower left, position 2, position 3, position 4, position 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. With this maximum gain and exposure, which we have purposely set, we can now go ahead and start clicking on these 9 positions on the wall, and in response, both the dry fire heads will move to that area, and its camera will be looking for any infrared in that area. So it starts, and actually the cameras are turned on right now. We're in the center position, and up in these 2 viewing areas, the one on the right for the right-hand head, the one on the left for the left-hand head, we are looking for either yellow or blue areas. If it is just completely black, everything is just fine. The cameras cannot see any infrared on the wall. So let me start like we started with the camera test in the lower left-hand corner. Do I see any yellow or blue in either of these viewing windows? No. I move to station 2. Do I see any? No. I move to station 3. Then I move to station 4. Then I move to station 5, always looking for yellow or blue in these black windows. And then I move on to station 6, move on to 7, move on to 8, and we started at 9, which I'll return it to there. So in my situation right now, on my wall, it's a perfect wall. I can have maximum camera exposure and maximum gain, and neither of the heads sees any infrared anywhere on my shooting wall. Having introduced unwanted infrared, we will change the camera exposure value and watch the shape and color of the indicated infrared areas change. I have now positioned an incandescent bulb about 2 feet from the shooting wall and about 3 feet above the floor. So let's go ahead and see now whether the left and right cameras are capable of seeing this infrared coming from this exposed bulb. Now notice up here, the left-hand panel right here, this is the left camera viewing the wall directly in the middle of the screen. As you can see down here, it started out positioning us looking right square in the middle, not near the bottom, not near the top, right in the middle, not to the left and not to the right. So the left camera is seeing this big blue area there, and the right-hand camera is seeing also a big blue area, which appears to be lower and a little bit to the left. Now let me go ahead and click down here and force the cameras now to look in the center of the wall, but down towards the bottom. Notice now that although both of the infrared blobs are to the right of center, they're both very clear. Now what we're going to do now is go down and start reducing the camera exposure to show you the effect that camera exposure has on infrared on the wall. With the camera exposure set to high, we are basically letting all the light that is available into the cameras. So now as we begin to drag this down lower and lower, we are reducing the amount of light that we are allowing into the camera. It's the same as an f-stop on a camera, where you allow less and less light to enter as the f-stop goes higher. Now notice that as I'm bringing this down, the blue blobs are getting smaller and smaller as we're restricting the amount of light that comes in through the camera. Now notice that the left one has turned into a yellow condition. And that is something that we're doing inside of DryFire. We're determining how much infrared the camera is seeing. On the camera on the right now, because of the way it's viewing things, it is seeing more than 40 camera pixels worth of information. And so when that happens, DryFire refuses to shoot the gun. So the same malfunction can happen with lighting conditions on the wall. If there's too much infrared, the gun will not shoot, because DryFire says that couldn't possibly be the laser in the end of your gun. And on the other hand, if it's less than 40 camera pixels, then DryFire doesn't know. It could possibly be the laser, and so it will shoot. So we're seeing right now at this particular exposure value, the right-hand head is saying that this is too much light, I wouldn't shoot. And the left-hand one is seeing less light, and it's saying, yes, I would shoot, and it's in a yellow condition. Now, notice also up here on the left-hand portion, it says shot. And if I turned on the play sound right now, listen what's going on in the background. So if you click on play sound when a shot is detected, this is detecting a shot. It's because of the infrared on the wall and because of the specific sensitivity I have of the exposure. And so this side is shooting, while notice on this side, on the right-hand side, it's ignoring it. Now, as I take this down farther, notice that the right-hand side now very quickly gets into a side where it's less than 40 camera pixels. And up here it also says that it's busy shooting. So if you had this much infrared on the wall, there's really nothing you can do with it, because as you come on down farther and farther and make this, the actual amounts of pixels become less and less. But notice that I get all the way down to the lowest possible value. And if I turned on the sound, both cameras are busy firing. So this is the kind of condition that some people will have when they've got too much infrared on the wall, and it cannot be solved by doing anything with the exposure value. If I go ahead, then I'm going to drag this back on up. Notice that as I give more and more exposure, it becomes more and more sensitive to the infrared all the way up on high. Now let me finish by, let's look around the room a little bit more and see if this is infrared that's localized or if it's everywhere on the wall. So position 1, lower left-hand corner, notice that neither camera sees any infrared. Position number 2, it sees no infrared. Position number 3, no infrared. Position number 4, high in the center of the wall, no infrared. Position number 5, high right, it sees no infrared. Position 6, no infrared. Position 7, no infrared. And then again back to position 8, all kinds of infrared. And position 9, right square in the middle of the canvas, and there's infrared. Demonstrate the difference between camera exposure and gain. The purpose of this segment is to show you the relationship between exposure and gain. And so to show that to you in a simplified form, I have taken the gain control and taken it all the way down to the lowest spot. What I'd like you to notice at this point is exposure is set at maximum or high. Let's watch the size of these infrared blue blobs as I increase the gain. Notice that they are starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger. What I can conclude from this is the gain is always amplifying what is seen just simply through exposure. Or in other words, suppose we didn't have this gain control. That would be similar to having this down at its minimum. This would be the maximum infrared that we could see through the camera lens. However, if I then increase the gain, I can see even more infrared. How does this relate to the whole picture? This would be a situation where you're struggling with the camera seeing enough infrared on the wall. It's not so much that you have unwanted infrared on the wall, but if your laser is weak or you're standing back a long distance and you're trying to maximize the amount of infrared that dry fire can see, then you're going to want to have the exposure value to maximum, and you're probably going to want to move the gain up to maximum. And then it is the most sensitive that it can possibly be to infrared coming from the muzzle of your gun. However, if you have stray infrared on the wall and you're trying to overcome a weak laser, either because of the distance from the wall or the laser itself, you are not going to be able to get the job done. This brings this demonstration to an end, and I'll summarize by saying the following. Use this feature, the camera exposure, to look around your room and find unwanted infrared. It will either be blue blobs or yellow blobs. If you find either of those in any portion of your wall, you have a lighting condition in your room that you're going to have to change. You're going to find either an incandescent bulb or something that is putting infrared on the wall at that spot, and you need to correct that. On the other hand, if you look around the room and there is no infrared on the wall anywhere, then theoretically you can go ahead and increase the exposure to maximum and the gain to maximum, and there should be no problems. However, in the software, we generally set the software so that the value is about 3/4 of the way. So this would be a more normal setting, and of course this would be in a room that did not have any infrared. Test an individual gun laser. And I'm now ready to test a gun laser. So I have it mounted on my gun. I'm going to click on camera exposure. I'm going to come up to this dialog box and click on Play Sound when a shot is detected. And then I'm going to mount my gun and shoot at the two lasers that I see on the wall. And you heard a shotgun blast when that took place. And notice up here, there's a yellow dot up here on the left camera and a yellow dot on the right camera. And so this was produced from my gun laser, seen by the camera, and the sound of a shotgun was made when that was done. Now I'm going to go ahead and shoot again, and notice up in this portion right here to the left and to the right, you're going to see the word shot appear as I pull the trigger. And again. And again. So that's how simple it is to be able to test your lasers. The default condition for where the visible lasers will appear on the wall will be here in this center position. And if you want to move this around the room and do it in other places, you certainly can. We've been through a lot in this video, but I certainly think that you will now be able to determine whether you have unwanted infrared on the wall, where it is, how to adjust it if that's possible, or remove it by changing your room. Thank you for watching the entire video. There was a lot of information to cover here. In summary, we have learned how to use the dry fire tool itself in order to find out if there's unwanted infrared on the wall. We've learned how to adjust the exposure and the gain, and we've been able to check gun lasers. Well, I hope that helps you.